The rain had been falling over the Pacific like it had something personal to settle with the sea. It wasn't heavy rain, not the kind that announced itself. It was the quiet, persistent kind that soaked through uniforms, slipped into metal seams, and made everything feel colder than it should have been. On the flight deck of the USS Ardent Resolve, red and amber lights reflected off wet steel, stretching into long, trembling lines as crew members moved with practiced urgency. Below deck, in a secured operations briefing room, a dozen men sat in silence. They were not ordinary men. They were Navy SEALs, some with decades of combat etched into the corners of their eyes, others younger, but already carrying the weight of wars that never made headlines. Patches marked deployments most civilians would never hear about. Names were rarely spoken here. Reputations were. At the head of the room stood Admiral Thomas Hale. Hale was the kind of officer whose presence bent the air. White hair cut short, posture unyielding, eyes sharp enough to make captains straighten without realizing it. He had commanded fleets, ended conflicts before they reached the news, and buried friends without ceremony. When he spoke, people listened, not because of rank alone, but because history stood behind every word. Tonight, however, his expression carried irritation. He tapped a folder against the table, once, twice, the sound echoing. "All right," he said, voice combat-edged. "Let's address the elephant in the room." No one moved. Hale turned slightly, his gaze landing on the last seat at the far end of the table. It was occupied by a woman. Lieutenant Commander Evelyn Cross sat perfectly still, hands folded, back straight. Her uniform was immaculate, her hair pulled tight beneath regulation constraints. No jewelry, no personal markers. Only the faint scar near her jaw hinted at a past that paperwork couldn't summarize. She did not look nervous. She did not look defiant. She looked unreadable. Hale studied her for a moment longer than necessary. "I've read your file," he continued. "Extensively." He let that hang in the air. Multiple black site operations. No public commendations. No interviews. No press. Half your deployments are redacted to the point of absurdity. A faint murmur passed through the room, quickly silenced. Hale tilted his head. "And yet, here you are, assigned to a joint task force that includes some of the most experienced operators in this fleet." He paused, then added, almost casually, "So tell me something, Commander Cross." She met his gaze. "Yes, sir. What's your call sign?" There it was. A question that should have been routine. Light even. In SEAL culture, call signs were often born from jokes, mistakes, moments of embarrassment turned into badges of honor. They broke tension. They humanized. A few men shifted, some smirked faintly, expecting something ironic, something forgettable. Cross did not answer immediately. The silence stretched. Hale raised an eyebrow. "Didn't hear me, Commander?" "No, sir," she said evenly. Then she inhaled slowly. "Night Fox." The reaction was subtle, but real. A couple of heads lifted. One man's jaw tightened. Another stopped tapping his fingers. Hale's expression barely changed, but something behind his eyes sharpened. "Night Fox," he repeated. "That's interesting." A hint of humor touched his voice. "Care to explain the origin? Or is it classified too?" A few quiet chuckles surfaced, respectful but amused. Hale was known for testing people this way. Pushing, prodding. Cross's gaze never wavered. "It's not a joke, sir." The chuckles died instantly. Hale studied her again, longer this time. The room seemed to contract, the hum of the ship fading into the background. "No," he said softly. "No, sir." Another pause. Hale nodded once, then turned away as if the matter were settled. "Very well. Let's proceed." But something had shifted. Even he felt it. 6 hours later, the task force was airborne. The mission was simple on paper and deadly in reality. A high-value target had surfaced in a region that technically did not exist. A shadow network responsible for arms transfers, cyber warfare, and proxy attacks had finally made a mistake. Intelligence suggested their commander, known only as the Architect, will be present for less than a 12-hour window. There would be no second chance. 2 stealth helicopters cut through the darkness, Rotors muted, lights dead. Below them stretched jagged terrain, valleys wrapped in fog like clenched fists. Inside the lead aircraft, the team checked weapons in silence. Cross sat near the rear, eyes closed, head slightly bowed, not in prayer but in calculation. Her breathing was steady, controlled. She wasn't running through fear scenarios. She was mapping terrain, timing movements, predicting variables. Across from her, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reed watched quietly. Reed had been in the teams for 18 years. He had seen confidence, arrogance, brilliance, and collapse. He had learned to read people fast. Cross was different. Not cold, not distant, contained. "You good, Commander?" he asked over the headset. She opened her eyes and nodded once. "Always." Reed hesitated, then smirked faintly. "Night Fox, huh?" She glanced at him. "Problem with it?" He shook his head. "Just not what I expected." "Neither was I," she replied. That ended the conversation. The helicopters flared low, landing without ceremony. The teams moved fast, dissolving into the terrain like ghosts. What followed was chaos measured in seconds. The compound was larger than intelligence suggested. Multiple layers of security, thermal traps, unmarked personnel who fought like professionals, not mercenaries. Shots were fired. Orders barked. Movement blurred. Then something went wrong. An explosion too close. The ground shook. Dust swallowed everything. "Contact! East wall," someone shouted. "Man down." Reed fired and moved, heart pounding, senses overloaded. Through the haze, he saw Cross ahead of him, already adjusting, already reacting. Then his comm crackled. "Command, this is Alpha 2. We're compromised." "Repeat, compromised." Static. Then a voice came through. "Calm. Controlled. Absolute. All units, fall back 5 meters. Do not pursue. Do not advance." Reed froze for half a second. That wasn't command. That was Cross. "Who gave that order?" someone snapped. Before Reed could answer, Cross was already moving, signaling with precision. "Trust me," she said. "Now." Something in her tone cut through hesitation like a blade. They obeyed. 2 seconds later, the east wall collapsed inward, exactly where they would have been. Silence followed. Not relief. Understanding. Reed stared at her, breath shallow. "You predicted that," he said. She didn't look at him. "I heard the charge placement." "You heard." "Listen later," she cut in. "Move." They moved. And from that moment on, no one questioned her again. Back aboard the Ardent Resolve, Admiral Hale stood alone in the command center, watching live feeds. He had stopped making jokes. He hadn't spoken in over 10 minutes. Every decision Cross made unfolded with terrifying accuracy. Enemy movements anticipated, ambushes avoided, losses minimized. At one point, a junior officer leaned toward Hale and whispered, "Sir, she's overriding standard protocol." Hale didn't look away from a screen. "I know," he said quietly. "And?" the officer asked. Hale's jaw tightened. "Let her." The room fell silent. Somewhere on the screen, Evelyn Cross moved through darkness like something born to it. And for the first time in years, Admiral Thomas Hale felt a sensation he had almost forgotten. Not doubt, not fear, but awe, because the call sign he had treated like a joke was turning command into silence. The compound fell quiet in a way that never meant safety. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the ears, heavy with unfinished violence. Smoke drifted low across shattered concrete. The echo of the explosion still seemed to vibrate through bone and memory, even as the night swallowed the sound. Evelyn Cross crouched near the remains of the east wall, eyes scanning, mind already 3 steps ahead. Her pulse was calm, not because she lacked fear, but because fear had long ago learned it had no authority here. "Perimeter check," she said into the comm. No lights. No voices. "They're not gone. They're regrouping." Reed slid in beside her, rifle up. "How do you know?" She pointed, not at the darkness ahead, but at the ground. "Foot spacing. Retreat pattern. This isn't panic. It's discipline." Reed exhaled slowly. "So what's the play?" Cross didn't hesitate. "We don't chase them. We become the threat they think they escaped." Across the valley, unseen eyes were watching. 5 kilometers away, deep inside a hardened command bunker, a man known only as the architect leaned forward in his chair. He was older than most assumed. Not frail, sharp. His hands were clean, his suit unmarked. His eyes reflected screens filled with shifting data and thermal feeds. "Replay that last sequence," he said. And A complied. The footage showed chaos resolving into control. A small unit pulling back moments before structural failure. Movements too precise. Timing too exact. The architect narrowed his eyes. "That wasn't improvisation," he murmured. "That was anticipation." The aide swallowed. "Sir, command thinks we should relocate." "No," the architect said quietly. "We've already been found. Running now only confirms our value." He leaned back. "There's someone new on the field," he continued. "Someone who listens instead of reacts." A pause. "Find her." Back on the ground, the task force advanced through a narrow ravine, moonlight barely touching the stone walls. The air smelled of damp earth and burned metal. Reed broke the silence. "You ever gonna tell us where Night Fox comes from?" Cross didn't slow. "It's not a story people like. Try us." She stopped, turned. The team halted instantly. "When I was 23, she said, voice low, "I was attached to a reconnaissance unit that didn't officially exist. We were sent to confirm intelligence that turned out to be a lie." No one spoke. "We were bait," she continued. "And we didn't know it." She knelt, checking a sensor, fingers steady. "They hunted us for 3 nights. No radios. No air support. No extraction." Reed's jaw tightened. "I learned then," Cross said, "that survival isn't about being stronger or louder. It's about becoming something the darkness itself doesn't notice until it's too late." She looked up. "They called me Night Fox because I was the only one who made it out." Silence followed. Not awkward. Reverent. Reed nodded once. "All right," he said quietly. "Lead on." At sea, Admiral Hale watched the feeds with his hands clasped behind his back. An intelligence analyst approached cautiously. "Sir, higher command is requesting justification for Commander Cross's authority override." Hale didn't turn. "Tell them," he said, "that every man on that ground is alive because of her. And if they push back—" Hale's eyes hardened. "Then they can answer to me." The analyst left without another word. Hale allowed himself one breath. He thought of the moment he'd asked her call sign with a smirk, expecting a laugh. He hadn't been laughing since. The final engagement came without warning. A false retreat, a collapsed tunnel, a kill zone designed by someone who understood how elite units thought. Someone almost as good as Cross. Almost. "Contact North Ridge." Reed shouted. "Hold fire," Cross ordered. "They want noise." Bullets tore into rock where they had been seconds before. Cross moved fast, not forward, not back, but sideways, slipping through shadow and debris like water finding cracks. She signaled silently, drawing the enemy's focus where she wanted it. Then she disappeared. Reed cursed under his breath. "She's flanking alone." "No," another operator said quietly. "She's hunting." Minutes stretched. Then a single transmission cut through the chaos. "Target acquired," Cross said. "The architect is here." The bunker doors never stood a chance. Inside, Cross moved with precision that felt unreal, disarming, disabling, never wasting motion. When she reached the inner chamber, she found him waiting. The architect regarded her calmly. "So," he said, "you're the Night Fox." She didn't raise her weapon. "Yes." He smiled faintly. "You turned command into silence tonight." "Impressive." She stepped closer. "You turned people into assets. Tonight that ends." He studied her, searching for something. Anger, hatred, satisfaction. He found none. "Legacy is a strange thing," he said. "It belongs to whoever survives long enough to define it." Cross met his gaze. "No," she replied. "It belongs to those who protect others without asking to be remembered." She cuffed him. Outside, dawn began to break. The operation concluded without further loss. No speeches, no ceremonies, just quiet professionalism. Back aboard the Ardent Resolve, the task force stood assembled. Admiral Hale faced them, posture formal, expression controlled, but his eyes betrayed something deeper. He stopped in front of Cross. "Commander," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "I owe you an apology." The room stilled. "I underestimated you," Hale continued. "And I won't make that mistake again." He extended his hand. Cross shook it once. Firm. Respectful. "No apology needed, sir," she said. "You asked a question, and you answered it," Hale replied. He turned to the team. "Effective immediately, Commander Cross will be assuming strategic advisory authority across this task group." No one objected. No one even blinked. Weeks later, reports circulated through channels few would ever access. Operations adjusted. Threats neutralized before they surfaced. Casualties dropped. A name appeared in margins and footnotes. Never headlines. Never commendations. Just a call sign whispered in rooms where decisions mattered. Night Fox. And somewhere in the quiet between missions, Evelyn Cross stood alone on a deck, watching the ocean swallow the sun, content to remain unseen. Because legends weren't meant to be loud. They were meant to endure.